Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Bradley. Welcome to the third and final DG Primer video for our series on the Gospel in the Old Testament. Today, we're in for a doozy. We're in for one of everybody's least popular, I think is the correct way to say it, least popular books of the Bible. We're going to be in Leviticus Chapter 16. If you have a copy of God's Word, I've got mine right here. Turn to Leviticus 16 with me. There's a couple of things that we're going to be talking about in Leviticus 16. Leviticus 16, the title that, at least that my Bible gives to this chapter, is called the Day of Atonement. This is a day where the high priest goes before God and makes sacrifices to cancel out the sin of the people. And today we're going to look at how that process happens and what that means. Just to kind of color in and fill in the backstory here, the Day of Atonement, the day of meaning the day of, I don't know how to make that simpler, but atonement is a word that I Googled to get a precise definition, and it is to make amends or reparations for a wrong or an injury. So the process of atoning for something is taking something that has gone wrong, taking something that has failed, and correcting it, making a right out of a wrong, essentially. And so on the Day of Atonement, like I said earlier, sacrifices would be made so that the sins of the people would be made right, that the sins would be washed away or taken care of so that the people are in right standing with God. So that's what we're going to be looking at this week. Hopefully you've made it to Leviticus 16 in your physical copy, or on your computer right here. You can just open another tab and go over to Leviticus 16. You can read this whole chapter. It's not super long, but you don't have to. I'll kind of lead us through it. The first thing that I want us to see in Leviticus 16 is that Aaron, who is the high priest at the time, he has to make atonement for himself before he makes atonement for the people. If you're looking here, Leviticus 16:6 says, Aaron shall offer the bull as a sin offering for himself, and shall make atonement for himself and for his house. And then skip to verse 11. Aaron shall present the bull as a sin offering for himself, shall make atonement for himself and for his house. He shall kill the bull as a sin offering for himself. And this is all taking place before the atonement for the people, before Aaron is able to step into the role of taking atonement or making atonement for the people. He himself needs to be deemed clean and worthy of beginning the atonement process, which is very interesting. The second thing that I want to point out is that the people's sins are placed on a scapegoat, and then the goat is like run out of town, literally. It's really quite interesting. Here, verse 20 through 22, I'll read. It says, And when he has made an end of atoning for the holy place and the tent of meeting and the altar, he shall present the live goat, and Aaron shall lay both his hands on the head of the live goat, and confess over it all the iniquities of the people of Israel, and all their transgressions, all their sins. And he shall put them on the head of the goat, and send it away into the wilderness by the hand of a man who is in readiness. The goat shall bear all their iniquities on itself to a remote area, and he shall let the goat go free in the wilderness. I think this is interesting because a lot of times we think of atoning through the lens of Jesus Christ, where the death is the death of Jesus, or the death of a animal sacrifice. The blood covers over the sins of the people, and that is certainly true. But what's really interesting here is that the sins aren't just like, oh, the blood washes over them and now they're gone. It's actually placed on a goat. Like, they physically believed that they were placing their sins on an animal, and then they ran the animal off so that the animal would never come back and bring their sins back. There was a physical leaving of sin, which I think is really interesting and something we're going to talk about in our DGs. And finally, the third point I want to point out is that this process requires sacrifices. We were talking about this. Aaron is required to sacrifice a bull. He then, to make atonement for the people, sacrifices a goat. And then a third goat receives all the sins of the people and is run out of town. And kind of an interesting side note, he was run out of town by someone who was not one of the Jewish people. He was not an Israelite, because you couldn't touch that goat. It had all the sins of the people. So they made a Gentile take the goat away, and we have records that say that they actually took it and would like shove it off a cliff or something, because they just didn't want the sin to come back. But this is costly. Bulls, goats, these things are very valuable. And this is what it takes to be made right with God. It is not going to be a cheap and easy process. It is going to require In the case of the Day of Atonement, it is going to require discipline and disciplines. It is going to require following an orderly step, and it is ultimately going to require death, in this case of an animal. But as we will talk about, for us, that death is through Jesus. And then metaphorically, that death is our own as we die to ourselves daily and live through Christ. So your leaders have some great questions and some great conversations prepared for you guys. I am excited to see what comes out of these conversations, and I will see you on Wednesday night. Peace.